Hello and welcome to the ROPESCAST, the independent voice of the Middle East. I'm Ksenia Svetlova. ROPES stands for the Regional Organization for Peace, Economics and Security. We are a young organization that works to lay the groundwork for a post-conflict Middle East by connecting forward-thinking young leaders from across the region. We share a holistic vision for the Middle East where everyone has more to win from conflict resolution and integration than to lose. If you are looking for more information on ROPES, please visit our website, ropes.org. And today in ROPES, we are very privileged to host Zahra Amanpour. Zahra is a lifelong human rights advocate and a proud supporter of the Iranian resistance movement. Born during the 1979 Iranian Revolution in Tehran, Zahra's life has been defined by the struggle for freedom and justice. Her father, a prominent advocate with Mujahideen al-Khalq, was killed in 1988, a summer marked by the mass killing of 30,000 of political prisoners following the end of the Iran-Iraq war. Raised by her mother within the Iranian resistance community, Zahra grew up surrounded by the courage, clarity, and conviction of those who refused to be silenced. She draws deep inspiration from the many women who have led the movement for a free, secular, and democratic Iran. Dear Zahra, thank you so very much for finding the time and joining me today. I have to tell you that, in this, this podcast, in this network of, we hope and pray for the freedom of Iranian people. Today, when the blood is spilling in the streets of Tehran and other Iranian cities, it's very easy to lose hope and to, in front of this horrific aggression against the peaceful demonstrators, just to say, well, so they are courageous, but what's next? So you are following this very, very closely, people in Iran, you're in touch with, as far as possible during this firewall and so on. Please update us. What's going on in Iran now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And thank you for bringing light to this issue and the voice of the Iranian people. We are grateful for that because that's not always what's being heard in the media. So we're very grateful for that. What's happening in Iran right now is exactly what we unfortunately anticipated would happen when this moment came. As you mentioned, I've been part of the resistance my entire life. I was born into it and I've been raised in it. And there has always been no doubt in our minds. And when I say our minds, I mean all of the people, the many people in Iran for 45 years who have wanted this regime to fall and who've wanted to bring democracy and freedom and a secular government to Iran. So that's when I say the resistance and I talk about us, that's who I'm referring to. We knew that when that tipping point came, which has come, when the currency collapsed, when the people just had enough. They've been fed up. We've seen several waves of uprisings in the last 15 years that have been very significant. In 2022, we saw how people rose against the theocracy itself and for their own personal human and civil rights. And now that has boiled over into a point where the economy has essentially collapsed in Iran. But this has been years of mismanagement and greed and corruption by the Iranian regime that has led to this moment. And the Iranian people are aware of that. They have been aware of it and they've had enough. And that is what we are seeing in Iran. The people, it is a mix of many emotions, of course, as with all things like this. There is a part of all of us in Iran and outside of Iran that are elated right now to see that this moment may have come, that a revolution is happening in Iran. And the people have gotten to that point where they are united on only one front, and that is to overthrow this regime, this dictatorship, and to bring freedom and democracy to their country. And as long as we stay focused on that and united around that message, it will continue to move forward. In response to that, of course, the regime is doing what we have always expected that it would do. It is brutal. It has always been brutal. It has done this in front of the world. It has done this behind closed doors. It has done this with political prisoners for decades. And as you mentioned in my introduction, 30,000 people were killed in one summer, including my father. So the fact that this regime is brutal.
Still, I've read about it and still you just cannot grasp it.
Yeah, it was, like right now, one of the chants in the street is this is going to be a bloody year down with Khamenei. This is this regime only knows blood and knows violence and the oppression of its people. And so for the people to rise, they are being brave, they are being courageous, they are standing up to this government. They are celebrating at certain moments. Some of the things that are coming out are celebrations of people feeling a sense of unity and a sense of strength together. And then more recently, what we've been seeing coming out of the country is horrifying, which is literally there are body bags lined up outside of hospital and people are coming in to claim their family and loved ones. So this is of course, the expected outcome, but it doesn't make it any less painful and horrible for the people experiencing it and for all of us who are watching and praying for those people.
I wanted to ask you actually, not only about those who protest, because, this is more or less clear, and we see that people from the bazaar are joining, the students are joining, this is very inspiring. But what about people who still support the regime? Of course, we do not trust anything that comes out of the official Iranian media. But, I spoke to experts and they say that there is still a base of support for the regime. Who are these people?
These are people who have financially and politically benefited from the regime's existence. These are people that, why is this a country rich with resources, rich with education, rich with all types of amazing things that should make for a beautiful, progressive country? Why is it having an economic collapse? Why is it in such a dark place? Because there's been a very few that have benefited from this corruption and from the sheer greed of what has happened in the Iranian regime. And, they've been filling their coffers for years, the money of the people with the resources of the people. And so, from an economic perspective, there's a very, very, very small minority that have benefited from that. And those are the people that, until the last minute will stand their ground. And as we saw in the 1979 revolution, as many of us have witnessed around the world, in those moments of truth and revolution, many of those people will then suddenly step aside and say, well, whatever happens, as long as I can figure out how to make money on it, I will, but there will always be, the regime has a very strong ideology. That has allowed it to get as far as it has and to do what it has done. So there will always people that will adhere to that ideology. And the Iranian people, the vast majority of the Iranian people, the masses right now have every intention of overthrowing that ideology and getting rid of it once and for all. So yes, there will always be these small pockets that the regime will put on, propaganda on TV to show, oh, we have support, but they're very small and they don't even come close to what's happening against the regime right now. So we have to be careful in the West to not allow those images and those videos. They are flooding the social media right now. They are flooding all types of channels. They see their collapse happening. So they have nothing to lose at this point. They're putting all of their resources, everything that they have to control the message externally. And they've shut off the Iranian people, as you well know. So we have to know that things that like that are coming out are very intentional, and they have an objective of misleading the world as to what's happening in Iran.
So, and another question on that, because, from what we know about the circumstances of the Islamic Revolution, is that, many people indeed believed in this idea that they propagated, that Islam is the solution for everything, that as long as we will have the Sharia law, then, our society will be more righteous, it will be more successful, and all of that. It seems that after more than 4 decades of this draconic rule, and we know that they also make fun of, like true Islam and its postulates and so on, So do you think that people who really believed, I mean, people who were innocent, who just believed the promises, they got disillusioned, they know now better, they know that, this regime will not serve them, but perhaps any other theocratic regime will not serve them as well?
Yes, absolutely. I think that was immediately evident. I think it's really important for people to understand what happened in 1979 and the 10 years that led up to that. Well, actually 20 years that led up to that. But the Iranian people rose against a monarchy because they don't want dictatorship. But they felt that their country was being sold to the West, that they didn't have control over their own resources, that they didn't have a say in sort of the way the government was being run. And the majority of the Iranian people were not benefiting from that. And again, you had a small minority that to this day, if you come in America, many of those people fled Iran in 1979. And many of those people are still saying, oh, that's the option that the people want. But the reality is the people overthrew the Shah of Iran in the hopes of a better option. At that time, there was a political vacuum that had been created in Iran where the Shah had either imprisoned or executed many of the more progressive movements that existed and still exist to this day in Iran. So the leadership had been kind of taken out in that moment. Khomeini recognized that. And stepped right into that power vacuum and was able to create a narrative that at that time they were so fed up with what that was that the people wanted to hope for something better, and they thought that their faith could help them get there. I am a Muslim, many Iranians are Muslim, but that is not the Islam that we practice, nor is it the Islam that we believe in. Immediately after the revolution, you're probably very familiar with this, with your background, if they took hold of the people, they immediately took the rights away from women. So half of the population was being severely oppressed, the entire population, but half of the population, literally all of their civil rights were stripped from them. And this is a country where women have always been very outspoken, very progressive, very involved in society. So the regime is not, a lot of times people think that these people that are evil like this regime, that they don't know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. They have been implementing these strategies and tactics for years. They have been able to hold the society down for 45 years. So when that happened, immediately after the Iranian people, there was many situations where they voted for parliament members like Mariam Rajavi, who's the leader of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. These people were elected in and then not allowed to take their seat immediately after the revolution. So the people thought they would have an opportunity still to sway, even if it was a theocracy, to sway it in the direction of good for the country, economic good, and sort of human rights from a human rights perspective. That didn't happen because the regime took hold so fast, and there was again a power vacuum happening. Since then, immediately after the regime took power, and the people started to see that, there was no doubt that the vast majority of Iranian people did not want this to happen, and were not for what was happening with the Iranian regime. But their tactics have been so vicious. Every time there's been uprisings, every time there's been any kind of dissent of any kind, the regime has, very systematically attacked and oppressed its people, from the political prisons and torture and methods that it uses to control. And so there was a whole generation of people my age that were born at that time whose parents either were on the side of the resistance and said, we need to fight back. And a lot of people just got scared, and for good reason, and said, we don't want to lose you. We don't want to lose our children again. We already shed so much blood, and look where that got us, and they were scared to rise. I think it's taken 45 years of our country sort of struggling within itself, not just with the regime, but within itself, to know that we are at a point now that we are one country regardless of our different beliefs, and that we all want actually the same thing, which is a free and democratic country, and to move our country forward and to be part of the progressive movement in this world.
But it seems that the theory that the Iranian people want monarchy again, it takes hold in many media outlets, and because the son of the Shah is Reza Pahlavi is so visible. I mean, he gives a lot of interviews and so on. In Israel, it's very, very popular, as you might know. So there is this kind of belief that they want to reinstate the monarchy. This is all about going back in time. So do you think that this is the case? Do Iranian people really want to go back in time?
No, I keep reading media in the West, in the United States, and in Europe, and it's like it's covering the story, and then all of a sudden it inserts this line, Pahlavi, Shah, this and that. It's like this. It's almost like this script that has been inserted into every newspaper, every publication, every media outlet you can imagine. there is manipulation happening. And the Pahlavi for 45 years has essentially done very little for his people. He comes every time there's an opportunity like this that arises, suddenly he's all over the media again. Suddenly
Exactly.
he's the leader of the people. What he is doing is getting in the way of democracy and freedom for his people by suggesting that we want to go back to a monarchy, that we want to go back in time to something that we literally kicked out of the country. I mean, there's no end if or buts. It was one of the most stark revolutions ever to happen in modern history. We literally said, get out of our country, go away. We want nothing to do with you. To think that we want as a country to go back to that's what the Iranian people want is just ludicrous. It's really ludicrous. There are people who, however, know that the Shah, just like previously, can be controlled. And so they're doing their manipulation of the media. They're doing what they're doing to make sure that he comes forward as the voice of the Iranian people. The Iranian people do not want any sort of dictatorship. And if you actually listen to the chants and understand the chants, a lot of times they're saying, oh, that we're hearing that they want the Shah on the street. I have not heard one chant in the streets of Iran from any of the sources, and the resistance has lots of stuff coming out that says they want the Shah. There are some controlled things happening, some manipulations happening, but nobody wants the Shah back. The only thing the Iranian people want is freedom and democracy. They want a chance to have their own government and to decide who leads them, and they deserve that. And that's what the resistance wants for them. We are going to help them get there. There is organized resistance in Iran that has been sort of part of this and helping the people to sort of, the resistance has been doing this for so long. We know how to sort of do things on the street. We know how to minimize loss of life. We are trying to do this in a way that brings the will of the people forward, minimizes loss of life, and leads us to that overthrow and eventually to peace and stability in our country.
Zahra, let's, try to jump into the future. So we spoke a little bit about the past and how the Iranians do not want to, if I would be Iranian, I would not want to go to what I already knew in the past. Democracy, it's something that Iran didn't experience yet, unfortunately, but maybe soon. If the regime falls today, okay, so hopefully it will fall as soon as possible to avoid more loss of human life. But, something tells me that they will still fight for their life and continue, spilling blood of fellow Iranians. But when it does, what happens next? Because, we've seen the Arab Spring. It was messy. Not one country is actually, can have like this record of success. No, not one country became a democracy eventually, So how do you envisage, what will be happening in Iran?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, that's up to the Iranian people. So let me just put that up there first. That's up to the Iranian people. The National Council of Resistance of Iran, which is a group of 480, I think 85, 86 different populations, ethnic groups, religious groups. It represents the vast majority of Iran. The only people that are not on the National Council of Resistance of Iran are people who want a dictatorship back in Iran, or any form of dictatorship in Iran. But as anyone who, the common sort of thread there is they all want freedom and democracy for the country of Iran. So the National Council of Resistance of Iran, that's led by Maryam Rajavi, has a plan. It's naive, and a lot of times people in the West when they talk to me about this, they say, well, we don't need leadership. We can just, things happen. And that's what leads to those messy situations like we saw in the Arab Spring risings and around the world. We've seen that time and time again. You have to have some sort of structure, some sort of leadership that takes you towards democracy. Otherwise, it gets chaotic and those power vacuums are created again. And then the will of the people is not realized. So the National Council of Resistance in Iran has a plan that they've put forward. You can go to their ncri.org. You can go to their website and see this in much more detail, where they want to put a provisional government in place for 6 months. They believe it shouldn't be more than 6 months, because then you start to get into this murky area of like, are they leaving? Are they not? It has to be fast. It has to be efficient. And it has to be represented by the people that will help transition the country to the place where they can have an election and vote in a parliament of some sorts. Then they will start to create laws then they will start to create their own constitution. Then they will start to create the what, sort of the guidelines for who can become president. How does it work in our country? All of that. But there has to be a transitional period with some structure that gets the people there. So the National Council of Resistance of Iran would like to be that structure. Their mission is to get the people to the point of a parliament. Once the parliament is created, they have fulfilled their mission. They will take a step back and allow the people to vote in their own representatives and then to move forward from there. So that is what we believe is the most would be the most effective plan for the Iranian people. However, again, we are not here to assume what the Iranian people want or what the Iranian people should do. This is up to them. They must decide this for themselves. Iranians, as you well know, are very sophisticated people, despite what we see in the West and the images that we have. And we have no doubt that they will be able to move themselves towards democracy one way or the other.
So, but before that will happen, a lot of things need to take place first. And this is, of course, the downfall of the regime. So we hear during the last few days, a lot of talk about how the US can help. There are disputed basically versions of what can happen. Trump said that he will not allow for the Iranian regime to keep killing people. But we understand that unfortunately there are many casualties and there are many people that are dead already. What do you think that the Iranians would want? Yes, to do.
The Iranian people do not want any foreign entity interfering in a military way that would sort of dictate what happens to the regime or what happens post-regime. They don't want any kind of interference from abroad. What the Iranian people want is their voice to be heard, number one. So anything that the West can do to get the real images, the real sort of struggle of the Iranian people out into the world and for the world to witness, that is one step that we can all participate in, but especially media outlets. This is the responsibility of the media outlets, that they don't always, they take that sort of low-hanging fruit often and they don't sort of dig deeper. They don't say, why is this, like with everything that's happening, why is it suddenly again this voice is flooding the market, or this is what we're hearing, and how can they basically be the voice of the Iranian people and not let the propaganda of the Iranian regime dominate the sort of media and what the people in the West and the people in the rest of the world are seeing. So that's one thing. One thing that United States, Europe, and others have done very effectively is sanctions. That has been a huge part which has led to this situation, actually. Many people think this is very controversial, but the sanctions, that targeted sanctions, continuing to tighten those sanctions, maintain those sanctions so that the regime doesn't have the money and the ability to continue this for too long, right? The longer it has money, resources, and access to the rest of the world, the longer it can do this to its people, the longer there will be bloodshed. We need to make this as short and as decisive as possible by tying the hands of the regime, by not giving them resources and economic means, and at the same time lifting the voice of the Iranian people. If those two things happen at the same time, then the Iranian people, 80 million strong, they can topple that regime. They don't need external interference to do that. They are very organized within. If you watch the protests, they're getting more and more organized in terms of the way that they're fighting against the sources and the forces, and they're getting more and more sort of tactical in what they're doing. There is resistance that has been doing this for a long time that is there to help them. They do not need any sort of Western military interference.
But what will happen if the Western military interference still will happen, in this way or another? I mean, we saw already during the June war that the US sent, its heavy bombers to target the nuclear facilities. What will happen if, for example, tomorrow the parliament will be hit, the Supreme Court, the residence of Khamenei, I don't know, other symbols of this horrific regime? How will it affect the protests?
Yeah, I think that the hope, if that happens, it happens. And I don't know that I don't know what's going to happen on that front. I really pray that it doesn't. But to your point, it is what they're talking about right now. President Trump just the other day sort of mentioned that casually again, and it's for those of us listening, it's like, oh no, is this really going to happen? If it happens and it weakens the regime, it's again not what we want to happen, but that is a good thing. Anything that weakens the regime is a good thing. The worry is that then the will of the people will not be able to control what happens next, right? Anytime an external force interferes, there's an expectation of reciprocity there, right, to some extent. And we don't want our hands to be tied. We want this to be truly a test of what the Iranian people can do independently and sort of create their own sovereign nation and participate in the economic, social, and cultural progress of the world fully. So in order for that to happen, we want to minimize interference. If it happens, we would just ask that at that point, we would have to sort of see what happened and then say, how can we still make sure that the will of the people is understood, the will of the people moves forward, and that the future of Iran is not tied to is not sort of owed to any one nation, one entity, or one force.
I see. Well, I can tell you that in Israel, there is definitely an expectation that the US will interfere. There is a little bit overexcitement over, the military might. If only, the planes would fly, and if only, the residence of the Khamenei will be destroyed, then, it will be all gone. But from we saw in Iraq, 2003, unfortunately, much more evil, powers they took to the power after that, and that could be also one of the consequences. I wanted to ask you about how did you feel during the last couple of years since the massacres of 10/7, when in the West, specifically in the US, but also in Europe, demonstrations took place in which, there were demonstrations that supported the Palestinians. In our organization, we support everybody who fights for freedom. We support the Palestinians, we support the Kurds, we support the Iranians, but we do not support evil forces such as the Iranian regime, the Hamas, the Hezbollah. And we saw that people were waving the flags of the Iranian Islamic Republic. We saw the support for Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas and so on. As an Iranian, how did this make you feel? Why did it happen, in your opinion?
I think it's ignorance, to be honest. I think it's ignorance. I think that, and it's naivety in the West. I think the young people of the West, and most people, I shouldn't even say just young people in the West, don't understand that your enemy of someone who's doing bad is not your friend, right? Like that they say the enemy of your enemy. I don't want to say enemy because, they're not enemies. But so I think people automatically go there. It's a simple solution to a very complicated problem. And especially young people are sort of swayed in that direction because it speaks to something, whether or not if you don't know the background of something, the radicalization of any faith, any movement, any all that is more appealing to young people who are looking for real change. And I think that's what happened in that case. I think that, first of all, people need to know that Hamas is one of the many proxies of the Iranian regime, and the way that it practices Islam and the fact that it exerts violence on people is not in line with the Islamic faith and not in line with what any peace-loving person should want or desire for any other peace-loving people. So Hamas is not the solution for the Palestinian people. Regardless of what you think the solution is, Hamas is not that, and supporting Hamas is not that. So I think that people need to understand that the regime is connected to all of that financially and ideologically, because the more havoc that it can wreak in the Middle East, the more it empowers the Iranian regime and gives it that might, because people start to see the Iranian regime as the voice of the oppressed in the Middle East. That is not the case at all. The Iranian regime is benefiting politically, financially, and ideologically from wreaking havoc, from funding organizations like Hamas and others in the region, the Houthis, all of these different proxies, what it's done in Syria, what it's done, it's doing it all the way through to South America at this point, right? Yeah. So that it only benefits the Iranian regime. We have to get more sophisticated than that. If we really want to start to understand how peace can come about, how we can help people who are experiencing oppression and violence, then we have to stop trying to turn it into a black and white issue and start to see the nuances and start to understand that there are many different entities involved with different intentions, and they are manipulating the situation. And the regime is one of the number one players in the Middle East. It is guilty of that. It has been doing that for decades, and its support and its havoc has led to the deaths of millions of people, literally. Even in Iraq, you mentioned Iraq, it was the regime who meddled there and made the extremists, the Shia extremists, so-called, in Iraq, create those governments, do those types of acts that they have done. They have been part of all of that type of meddling and manipulation, and they are, that's why we believe that when the regime falls, that there will be an opportunity not just for Iran to have freedom and democracy, but there will be more ability in the entire Middle East and frankly the world for there to be peace and stability and security for everyone. And so that's where we stand. I think in terms of how people interpret that, you have to go deeper. I always stand for people, for freedom. I will always, I'm someone who's protested my entire life, but you have to understand that anyone who is provoking violence, who is exerting force on a people, is not. You have to go deeper and understand what's their intention and what are they trying to do.
I heard just yesterday an interview with a Palestinian writer, I think his name was Randa Halwe, and who said that, yes, I'm fighting for my freedom, but the Iranian regime that oppresses its women, its people, and it's killing its citizens, it's not my protector. It cannot liberate me. It cannot liberate my people. And we should not be relying, on something as horrible as that. Nevertheless, you do not see you do not see a lot of supports a lot of demonstration in support of the Iranians. Are you disappointed that, it's not like really taking place? And why do you think it happens? Because when you think of oppression, yes, you do think of Iran, it's one of the regimes that you immediately think about it. And somehow we do not see really engagement, among the young people. We do not see a lot of protests near the Iranian embassies. Of course, Iranians go and protest, but what about everybody else?
Yeah, I think the narrative in the West has been so controlled by two very polarized views that it's led to people not sort of knowing what their place is. And I've, since this has started, I can't tell you how many people have reached out to me and said, please explain to me what's happening. And this happened in 2022 too. Right? Just help me understand what is happening here and why. I thought like the regime is part of the good people, and like they're really genuinely trying to get their heads around this. I think what the resistance has been able to do in the West, thankfully, over the years, is create a bipartisan support. However, the narrative is still very polarized, which is that on one side, it's appeasement, right? So, when there's a Democrat in office, it's much more about let's give them incentives, let's open up conversation, let's have a dialogue with the regime. And people who are on the side of peace, which a lot of times, I would imagine a lot of your audience may even think, well, that's good. How could that be a bad thing to have dialogue, right? Except that they don't understand what we're dealing with here. This is not an entity, an ideology that wants peace. Again, like what we were talking about, it thrives in chaos. It thrives in violence. That is at the core of its ideology, is that it will take out anyone at its own benefit, right? At any cost, in any way. It is vicious, it is violent. So people don't understand that dialogue doesn't work with the Iranian regime. It is only delaying and again empowering, giving it economic means to continue to survive longer and longer. It's actually hurting the Iranian people. Now, again, there's people who say, well, sanctions are hurting the Iranian people. Targeted sanctions that we've seen happen don't hurt the Iranian people. They hurt the Iranian regime and have led to the Iranian regime right now being weaker than it's ever been in the history since its inception, and is now, we can see the light at the end of this struggle, which is that it will fall because it's so weak, and that's so appeasement undermines that progress towards the regime falling and the Iranian people being able to rise and actually up against the government. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you have what we're talking about now, which is military might, interference in sort of the future of Iran. That is also not the will of the Iranian people, and that is not going to bring freedom to the Iranian people. As you so accurately said, that is going to open up opportunities for people in Iran that don't have the right reasons to sort of rise and start to take advantage of what's happening, the chaos that will certainly come. There's going to be chaos when the regime falls, and so if there, like you said, if there's might on one side, that's going to only aid that chaos and allow for a power vacuum to happen. So neither one of these ends of the spectrum are the solution. We have to again understand the nuances, get into the understanding of like, what do the Iranian people actually want? How can the Iranian people transition, and how can we support that transition in the West? So I think if we could, right now you already mentioned what you're seeing a lot in the West is some things that the regime is letting out, which is like, oh, we have support, we're stabilizing the country, which is just not true, because everything else that's coming out from any other source is showing that the uprisings are only getting stronger and more bold. So, and unfortunately, more lives are being lost, which is always an indicator that the uprisings are getting more and not less, right? So that's one thing that we're seeing that we have to control. And the other thing that we're seeing that we have to control is this, like, that the Iranian people want to go back to a monarchy. The Iranian people don't want to do that. So the more that we can give a different voice and help the Americans, help the Europeans, help the rest of the world understand actually what the will of the Iranian people is, I do think that they will want to support that. And I do think there will be more and more support in the West for that. However, it's been very complicated and not always clear on where to stand.
In regards to sanctions, I just recalled now when you were speaking about, the effect on the Iranian people. I produced a documentary in 2021 about the Belarusian women who protested against Lukashenko. And many of them told me during the interview, I've been to Minsk, and they told me, listen, we want, the West to cut off the SWIFT. We want for them to stop trading because, it will be tough. But we want this regime to eventually bleed out and just collapse. So it's something that will take time, but we support it. So they were not against it. Again, different people think differently, but that's what I heard from many. I want to ask you very much about the change that can happen in the Middle East if the Iranian regime will fall, because in our network we are engaging in the future. We have in our network Palestinians, Israelis, Egyptians, and Jordanians, and Moroccans, and Emiratis, and Saudis, and everybody else, and also some Iranians that dream about post-conflict Middle East, integrated Middle East, that will be just, that will be fair, that will be a place where people can live and not just survive. So for that, a lot of things need to change in Israel, in PA, in Arab countries that need to be more engaged, of course, and so on. And yes, a lot of things need to change in Iran. How do you see this change? How do you see this opportunity? How do you see the Iran of tomorrow?
Absolutely. So I think just starting with the fact that we could have a majority Muslim country with a true democracy in the Middle East would go a long way, right? Just that example of and population the size of Iran, with the sophistication of its people, for that to serve as an example of a country who has risen up out of Islamic fundamentalism, established a democracy, I think can serve as an example for so many other parts of the Middle East and the world, frankly. So I think that in itself symbolically would be huge. The other thing is that, my hope is that Iran will be, I was raised in, as you said, the MEK, Mujahideen Khalq, part of the resistance. My father was killed by the regime. I was raised in a movement that is led majority by women and Muslim women. They cover their hair. They are not to be messed with. And I would welcome the opportunity for Iran to be led. I would personally vote for Maryam Rajavi, but to just be led by a woman and a progressive woman, whether she covers, whether she doesn't cover, but to be, and again, an example of the role that women can play in society, and what real, true freedom looks like for all people in a country like Iran. So I think that can play in another role. And then just the ideology and values of the Iranian people. Iranian people are not backward people. They don't believe in what the regime believes in at all. If their voices, if their sort of energy, if their will is actually allowed to be exerted and heard and realized around the Middle East and the rest of the world, there is no doubt that they would move that entire region in the right direction. They would be open to dialogue. They would be open to sort of alternative ways of solving crises and issues and differences. So having a people of that would like that rise in the Middle East and really serve as an example, I think would just change the dynamics. We are in a situation where right now, what has been given power and voice is just a backward ideology. It's Islamic fundamentalism, and it has nothing to do with the people of Iran or any. I don't believe the vast majority of Muslims in the world want anything close to that. But there has been lots of reasons for why these different governments, these different groups have been able to take power, have been able to do what they've done. And I think this would be one huge step in the direction of taking power away from those people and letting the will of the people of the Middle East be understood and realized around the world. No, the world is sick of this. The Middle East, people living in the Middle East in terror and violence are tired of this. We are all tired of this. We want to move forward, and I think this would be the first big step in that direction.
Well, for over 45 years, the regime was focused on Israel, destroying Israel, and it wasted a huge amount of money,
Yeah.
to achieve this goal that in the end, let's hope it will never achieve it. I don't think that they can, but how can Iran, better treat the resources, and how it will, spend it. It will not be, again, obsessed, with this Israel issue. How Iran, could thrive.
I think one, with the economic, just from sheer economic perspective, if Iran is actually allowed to build its own successful economy to the resources, the vast resources that it has in its country and has connections to outside of its country, if it's allowed to make those connections and make those sort of create those opportunities between itself and the rest of the world. I think, as someone who I personally, we didn't talk about this, but I work in economic development. I strongly believe in the idea that if people are sort of, economic justice and mobility leads to progressive things happening. I think that the obsession, again, every evil ideology needs an enemy. Right? If we remove the evil ideology, Iran is not looking for an enemy. It's not looking to point the finger at one place. It's not looking to point the finger and say, it's looking to sort of take control of its own fate. Right? So I think if the regime is gone and you have reasonable people who are trying to just build a successful country and a forward-thinking country, naturally that sort of us against them and that pointing the finger and violence that comes from that will dissolve and go away, and we can all move forward together. So I think it's just it's something that the regime needs. It's always needed it for to be able to stay in power. It came to power not acknowledging what had happened in Iran and sort of what had sort of the grabbing of resources that had happened in its own country. It came to power by just creating an enemy. And that, in 1979, it was shouting at America and now it's shouting at Israel, shouting at whoever. That it can find that creates that enemy for itself and empowers it the way it has. And it's just a dynamic that has to be destroyed. And I think if the regime is destroyed, so will that dynamic.
Yes, let's hope that this will what will happen. The last question, it's a personal one. So you told me about your heritage, about your father who died when you were very young. Yes,
Yeah.
you were a child. It's hard to say what he would say about, what is happening today, but what does your family say? You say that you are coming from this strong, family of women, opinionated women.
Yeah.
How do they feel about what is happening?
We are elated. I mean, the people I love dearly are smiling and really hopeful that what they've worked for decades and sacrificed for decades is finally happening. And we want it to, as I said earlier, to be as short as possible so that the loss of lives is as minimal as possible. But we have been prepared for what we're seeing right now, which is the violence that we're seeing happening against the protesters in Iran. But my family, when my father left to go back to the Middle East to be part of the MEK, one of the last things he said to me is, the next time I see you, we're going to be in Tehran together. And that's my next hug for you, is going to be in Tehran. So this is my father's dream come true. Because when the Iranian regime falls, many of us who have been fighting and supporting for the people of Iran and this movement for so many decades will go back to Iran and build Iran and help make the country fulfill what I believe to be its destiny. So this is all sort of the destiny of my people is how we see it. We are obviously very engaged right now, watching everything that comes out and getting our hands on anything we possibly can. And I strongly recommend, if people are looking for alternative sources that are not being manipulated, the People's Mujahideen of Iran, NCRI, are putting out daily footage of what is happening in Iran. Anything they can get, they are very well connected to the resistance movements in Iran. You can get your hands on that footage. You can and sort of understand better, see it without any voiceover. Just see what is happening. Understand. Take it and plug it into Google Translate and see what the slogans are actually and what the people are asking for. They want the fall of this dictatorship. So we're excited. We are. I would want nothing more than to take my children to Iran. I don't remember Iran. I left Iran as a baby. I would love to go there and help rebuild the country and raise my family there. And I think many of us feel that way and are so excited for that opportunity and want to do everything we can. We were on the streets this past weekend, trying to show that, the real voice and trying to make sure that there's an alternative to what's being shown right now. And we will continue. We have done that for 45 years. We will continue to do that until this regime falls. So we are excited. We're praying for our people. And we're hopeful that a new day is finally coming for Iran.
Thank you very much, Zahra. Thank you for joining us today. And I hope the next time we will speak, it will be in liberated Tehran.
Yes, Meiduna Azadi, which is our freedom plaza in the middle of Tehran. I hope to meet you there one day. Inshallah.
Thank you so very much. Inshallah, yes.
Yes.
You've been listening to the ROPESCAST, the independent voice of the Middle East. Our guest today was Zahra Amanpour, a proud Iranian, a human rights activist. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you like what we do, please subscribe to the ROPESCAST. It exists in every podcast platform. You can learn more about ropes at ropes.org. See you next time. I'm Ksenia Svetlova. Shalom and salam.